that you all write down any questions that you may have, and we'll save those for the end. And so just to begin, in case any of you all aren't familiar with the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, we are a statewide organization that is membership-based. And those members are made up of we have to update this now, over 100 immigrant faith, labor, youth, community, business, and allied organizations. So a mix of different organizations. We were founded back in 2002 to together collectively improve the lives of immigrants and refugees by making Colorado a more welcoming and immigrant-friendly state, right? And we do that in a variety of ways. Our organizations do a variety of work, from direct services to legislative and policy advocacy to legal advocacy. So altogether, we work to do this through nonpartisan civic engagement, public education, and overall just advocating for fairer policies at our Capitol. And so I'm happy here today to do a piece of our public education, of sharing this knowledge with you all. A little disclaimer that we like to share at the beginning is that I am not an attorney. Unfortunately, on our staff, we do not have attorneys on staff, but we do have those connections with attorneys if needed. We just say this as a disclaimer to say that we can't answer any specific legal questions. But of course, this general knowledge is public education that anybody can share, and we advise everybody to share the knowledge about our rights, especially in this moment where they're being attacked, right, and they're more vulnerable. It's exceedingly more important to know what our rights are so we know when they are being violated. And so to continue on, I do want to recognize, right, this intense moment that we are in right now. Unprecedented enforcement and raids. Now our immigrant community has lived with the fear of deportation and detainment, unfortunately, for many years and decades. It's not anything necessarily new for our undocumented communities, but this specific targeting of all immigrants, especially more people who are detained with no criminal records at all, is exceedingly alarming, right? And it has increased, and we're seeing an increase in warrantless arrest. This militarization expansion of ICE is unprecedented, right? This amount of funding that our federal government has given to just this one department, that now one federal agency within our country receives more funding than other countries' entire military's budgets is very alarming, right? That they call themselves the Department of War as a department, right? I think that messaging alarms us all. And so with that, we've seen an increase in mass raids, surveillance, racial profiling, unfortunately, and these plans for new detention centers, right? In the state of Colorado, there was news of 6 proposed new detention sites. Unfortunately, as of now, one of them in Hudson, Colorado, does seem to be opening imminently. They predict it will open in June. And so that is some news to keep out. That will unfortunately double the size of detention within our state. That Hudson Detention Center, which they are naming the Rocky or the Big Horn Detention Facility, will have the capacity to hold upwards of 1,000 people, which is terrible news. And they're building throughout the state a bunch of these detention centers, including warehouses where they're detaining upwards of 1,000 folks with very, very inadequate conditions, right? And so all of this is very real. It's what we're experiencing now. But what is true, as it always has been true, is that preparing, organizing community, all of our knowledge, and together, we have power. I try to have hope and remind myself with this quote. This quote, the power of the people is always greater than the people in power, at least gives me some hope that, right, that even though there might be some, maybe some malintended men and people in power right now, there is still more of us good, right, in the world, and we have to recognize that we do have that power, although we might not be those folks in power, right? But we still do carry that power, and I think we just all have to show up for each other, right? Especially in this moment where fascism is prevailing. And so, thank you for wanting to show up and do that. And I encourage us to remember that the people united, will never be defeated. That's like the chant that we always say, right? And so now I want to get us into some of those Colorado protections, because fortunately through the efforts of our immigrant elders, we have a lot of protections in this state for our immigrant community. And so here I'll talk about those protections that are Colorado specific. If you want to learn more about them, we have our website, it's coloradoimmigrant.org. We have a Know Your Rights page that is dedicated specifically to this content, and you can learn more in depth about it there. But essentially in Colorado, we have limitations or limits on how ICE can collaborate. ICE in Colorado cannot make arrests in or around any courthouse, or when someone is on their way to or from court. What becomes difficult with this legislating ICE activity, right, is that they're federal agencies, and so we can't necessarily legislate or dictate what they do since they're a federal agency, right? We don't have jurisdiction over that as a state. But we can control, right, what state officials do, what happens within our state. And so when it comes to that law, no one around the courthouse, including, for example, like probation officers, should be sharing information with ICE. No one, they're prohibited to unless there is that warrant or a judicial warrant or subpoena. You also have to be informed of your right to refuse an interview with ICE if you are in custody. And if you post bond for a person that's then deported, you are entitled to a full refund of that bond. But a note, right, is that unfortunately, as of March of this year, we are documenting various cases, including, unfortunately, lots here in El Paso County, where folks were documenting, were leaving the courthouse and unfortunately were detained by ICE. And so, like we said, we try to dictate or legislate that no one within the court can share that information, but what we can't control is that ICE, unfortunately, is just waiting in public spaces outside the courtroom and then picking up folks that way. And that, unfortunately, is happening. We know that it can be scary for folks, so they're put in this precarious situation where they have to risk not going to a legal appointment or risk getting detained at your legal appointment, right? It's like a lose-lose. But we do encourage people to not miss their court appointments, and we strongly encourage them to make a plan to be accompanied by somebody else. And so we do have this program. This is more Denver-based because the Federal Immigration Court is in Denver. But also I know some folks, we have lovely volunteers with like Accompaniment and Sanctuary Coalition that I'm sure would be able to help accompany. And we always are looking for more folks to get trained on how to accompany folks to these appointments, because it makes a difference to have an ally there with you, right, who a second pair of eyes, we know makes a difference in how ICE operates. Or to even be there and document makes a huge difference too. And so that's what we recommend, as well as here, if you look, it's kind of small, but we'll bring it up again. We have the Colorado Rapid Response Network. Who here has heard of the Colorado Rapid Response Network? Okay, that's good, a good amount of hands. So that is a 24/7 rapid response hotline that anyone within the state of Colorado can call to report any suspected ICE activity. You don't have to be sure, right? As we encourage you to call if you're not sure. And then we have trained volunteers who go out and confirm, they're called confirmers, whether or not ICE is actually there. There's a lot of fear right now in our community, and oftentimes our confirmers go out and it's not ICE, thankfully, right? It's just police doing some sort of other enforcement, another agency. And so that's why our confirmers are really valuable, because then they can report that accurate information back to the community, and our community can go about their day a little bit safer and calmer, or knowing that accurate information, right? And so that number is on the screen, and I'll also read it out in case you all don't have it in your phones. I recommend you put it there. 1-844-864-8341. 1-844-864-8341. And so call that rapid response line if you do see any activity. Also, we have the option too for that line, where folks who are already impacted by detention can call to get access to resources. We have volunteers who are part of the docu team they document that case to help their own individual advocacy, right, of were your rights infringed upon, what happened. They document that case, and then they connect them to local resources. Okay, moving on, we also here within the state of Colorado have protections against criminal extortion based on immigration status. Unfortunately, especially now, our community is especially vulnerable, where landlords, neighbors, just other malintended people are threatening our community, forcing them to give money or, to work with the threat of calling ICE or reporting their immigration status. Know that that is illegal, right? There is criminal extortion, and we advise people to report that. Here is additional protections that we have. In terms of immigration detention, police departments within the state of Colorado cannot hold someone for ICE beyond their scheduled release dates. So what happened in the past, including here in El Paso County, the police would get notice by ICE of a specific person and they'd be like, we can't get to this person until a couple days, can you hold them for us, please? They would hold that person even though they were supposed to be released so that ICE could come and pick them up and then detain them, right? That is illegal. When somebody's set to be released, they cannot be held for ICE, they have to be released. IGSA contracts, these are contracts where local jails would rent beds to be used by ICE for immigration detention. Those contracts are now illegal too. So no local jails may rent beds, may be detaining folks for immigration detention. And police cannot arrest us based solely on our immigration status. So police should not be asking for immigration status and cannot arrest us because of that. Lastly, for data privacy, we have protections here within the state of Colorado where state agencies cannot share personal identifying information with ICE without a warrant or a subpoena. And then third-party entities can only access state databases if they sign an agreement that they're not going to share that information with ICE. We had a little bit of a gap within this law. If you see it mentions only state agencies, and then we realized, well, it didn't cover local, it didn't cover cities. And so this was passed back in 2021, and fortunately, last year, we were able to pass this new law, SB 276. And so this law is fully in effect as of September 1st of last year, and it strengthens that data privacy protections. And so now that data privacy applies to all agencies within our state, from state to local, county. All of those agencies, including law enforcement, cannot collect or share your information for the purposes of immigration enforcement unless there is that judicial warrant or subpoena or you're a part of a criminal investigation. So it's really asking for the bare minimum, right, and making sure that there is that warrant in order to initiate an investigation and sharing of information. And so whenever we should feel safe in knowing that our information cannot be shared unless that there is that judicial warrant. Within public schools, public clinics, childcare centers, and libraries, these entities have to have written policies for how they'll interact with ICE. Both ICE asking for clients' personal information and for ICE wanting physical access to the space. So these entities have to have policies for how they'll handle that, and they cannot let ICE in unless they have a judicial warrant, subpoena, or court order. They cannot share information with ICE unless they have those official judicial documents as well. And they cannot let ICE into private areas unless they have that warrant. And so although these are public places, right, like a public school, public clinic, a lot of these public institutions have private places within them still. Schools nowadays, you have to pass the front desk, right, be buzzed in order to go into the classrooms. So past the front desk is considered private. In a lot of clinics, the exam rooms, you have to also be let in, past the door, buzzed in. So the client exam rooms are considered private. Depending on the libraries, lots of libraries have different policies, so we encourage folks to look at the specific policies of those institutions, but sometimes libraries classify their meeting rooms as private. So all of that, we as community have the right now to ask for these policies from these public institutions, and they have to have them by law. If they don't, according to this law, if there's continual violations, they can be fined up to $50,000, and that money will go directly to supporting the Immigrant Legal Defense Fund, which is a fund that helps provide legal relief attorneys, right, to people detained in detention centers because they don't immediately receive that support, right? And if I have these policy scenarios here just to make sure that we do understand this policy, and so I'll read the scenario, and then if you all just can tell me verbally out loud if you think the policy was followed or not. And so in this scenario, we have an ICE officer entering a public school. They ask the front desk staff for a student's file. The staff member refers the officer to the designated administrator and explains that records require a judicial warrant. Did the school follow the law?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so staff must follow that written policy and ask for that valid warrant before providing any information. This last one, we have a public health clinic, and ICE is requesting access to patient exam rooms. Staff asks for a judicial warrant before allowing entry. ICE does provide that judicial warrant, and so the clinic allows them access to the patient exam rooms. Was the policy followed? Unfortunately, yes. So policies require staff to deny access to the non-public areas unless there is that judicial warrant. And so that is a note for you all to know that unfortunately this law doesn't necessarily outlaw or restrict ICE from doing immigration enforcement at these public entities. It just makes them have to have the judicial warrant, right, to follow the law. 9 out of 10 times, though, how ICE is operating right now, they have these high quotas. They have low training and don't necessarily have judicial warrants. So this is asking that they do the bare minimum, right, of making sure that they have that judicial warrant. And if they do, then they can be allowed.
Could you clarify, because aren't they sometimes using administrative type paperwork?
Yes, so we'll get into the warrants piece in the future, yes. In a couple slides, we'll get into those differentiations, right? Because they do have administrative warrants that aren't judicial, but making sure that they are judicial warrants, and we'll talk about identifying them. Just for you all to know, we have, like I stated before on our website, we have an Understanding SB 276 page where you can find out way more. We have a booklet with FAQs, an information booklet, and then if you all are wanting to get more involved, we have a webinar where you go more into detail just about this law. Our upcoming one is Tuesday, June 23rd from 5:30 to 7. Within that presentation, we also go over community monitoring. And so that's a piece where you all can volunteer, can help us ensure that this law is actually being implemented, because not a lot is done on the government side to make sure that this law is actually being followed. And so Connie has helped us with community monitoring. What we have you do is just go into public institutions that are close to you, right? Your public schools that are close by, public libraries, and just go and ask if they have the immigration policy, right? Because anybody in the public should be able to go and ask. And then you're almost like a secret shopper in helping us know whether or not, right, the policies are being followed or not. So that's an amazing way for us, for you to help us and volunteer and a little bit more approachable for folks. So lastly, these are just some last overview of resources for folks to know here in our community or in Colorado for our immigrant community. Driver's licenses for immigrants. In the past, there used to be vast differences in how our immigrant community could apply for licenses. Now the requirements are the same for folks who are documented or undocumented. That really was paid by our iDrive coalition. The Immigrant Legal Defense Fund, like I mentioned before, there is that fund that can help provide direct legal services to Coloradans who are detained. The Unemployment Fund for Immigrants is new, so this is We're the first state to offer an expansion of unemployment for qualifying undocumented Coloradans. It's called the Benefit Recovery Fund. If folks, for some, have to qualify, right, of being fired for no fault of their own, if they qualify, they can receive up to $700 of unemployment fund, and it isn't considered a public charge. Also, a lot of folks right now are losing work authorization, or I know a lot of DACA folks who, because of how long UCIS is taking to process applications, their work authorization is expiring and they have a lapse, they also can qualify for this unemployment fund in the meantime. And the Immigrant Tenant Protection Act was actually passed in 2020, and it prohibits landlords from harassing, intimidating, or evicting tenants solely based on their immigration status. Undocumented immigrant students can also access in-state tuition and financial aid, and so there's the Colorado application for state financial aid that is available for undocumented students, and also students who are in mixed status households, right, who may not want to share their family's information with the federal government through the federal application of state financial aid, and instead might want to apply for the state application. Lastly, Cover All Coloradans is a Medicaid lookalike program for undocumented minors and pregnant people. Unfortunately, like a lot of our Medicaid programs, this program is also facing cuts, but it is a program still available for folks. And I mentioned before, if you witness a violation of these laws, we encourage you all to report that with the Attorney General. They actually now have on their site a portal where you can directly launch a complaint related to misconduct by federal agents. And so we encourage you, if you see a violation of any of these laws, you can reach out to us or directly report that with the Attorney General. Okay, and so now to review some of our rights. We'll review here some of that warrants piece, right, and also how to identify law enforcement. This identifying law enforcement is really important for our folks because it actually dictates the how we interact with them, right? And so I always encourage folks when you encounter law enforcement to first identify who specifically they are, right? Because when it comes to police, they do cover the town and municipality. They are accountable to our communities. The sheriffs cover the county and the jail. They serve official documents and enforce evictions. State Patrol covers the highways, and then ICE, or you might hear them called La Migra, that's how it's known colloquially in our community, right? They only were established in 2003. I think important context to know, right? Post 9/11, a strong xenophobic environment. Also, I think many folks have a hard time imagining a country without immigration enforcement, but we had a country without ICE for a long time, right? And so, important to know that they are only there to enforce federal immigration law. They are not accountable to our communities. So when I say that, I mean when we see police, when we see a sheriff, and they ask us to identify ourselves, we do have to, right? We're accountable to them, they're accountable to us, we have to identify ourselves, verbally even. If we're not driving, a verbal identification suffices, saying our name and date of birth. When it comes to federal agents, though, including ICE, we don't have to even give them our name. We don't have to identify ourselves at all. We don't have any reason to answer any of their questions. And so that's why I ask folks to ask them who they are first, right? Because if they're federal agents, if they're ICE, I advise us to use our Fifth Amendment right and stay silent, right? Especially because lots of times they may be coming with just an administrative warrant, which we'll get into, and are just looking for more evidence, more probable cause. They're going to try to probe people to get information, right? Where are you from? How long have you been here? Just like trying to ask and ask to get information out, get that probable cause out of people. And so best to just not even identify ourselves, and we don't have to when it comes to federal agencies. This here are some pictures on how we can identify ICE. When we refer to ICE because that's how they're known, right, vastly within our community, but Department of Homeland Security is the overarching agency, and they have various different departments within that, right, in different names. That here we see the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, we have enforcement and removal operations, Homeland Security investigators, Customs and Border Protection. And sometimes they can also have no uniform at all, right? Like here, we have some folks that are just wearing uniforms with no uniform and just like tactical gear, clothing that just says police. That can make it very difficult, right, to know who they are, very difficult to identify. That goes back to what I said before, where they know that police have more authority over us, right? And that's why they sometimes just have large badges or large vests that, or say police, right? Or police, if you see, is the biggest lettering in their different vests. And so good to know what specific agency they are. These do have like different purposes, but right now, right, are all do the job of enforcing federal immigration laws, and so are detaining people. Here are some pictures of the vehicles that they use. Likewise, they can be marked and unmarked. Also makes it difficult to sometimes identify them, but largely if they are unmarked, they're going to be American-made vehicles like Chevys, Fords, and so that's kind of a way to know. And some smaller towns are keeping track of some of the license plates that they were seeing, but I think that's kind of a tactic that can be hard to keep up with since they are keeping, I think, are now in the know now and are switching their license plates. But this is generally how to identify them. Now, I would like to get us into the Constitution just for folks to know that this protects us all within the United States, right, having legal documentation or not. And as I stated before, there's 3 amendments that we like to really highlight, the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th. The 4th Amendment being that to arrest someone, frisk someone, or search their property, you have to have that probable cause, right? The 5th Amendment being that we have the right to remain silent, and the 6th, that we have the right to know the charges against us, the right to legal representation, and due process. And so when it comes to these amendments, like I stated before, I really encourage folks to remember that we have that right to remain silent, to invoke our 5th Amendment. I've seen videos, I know we've seen terrible videos of immigration enforcement, but I've also seen videos that have given me hope where people, immigrants have maintained silence, shown their Know Your Rights card, their red card, and been able to safely leave the situations with immigration enforcement because they knew their rights and didn't give more information than they had to. So I've also seen situations where knowing your rights has protected people and made a difference. And so it's important for us to know, right? And when it comes to warrants, as I said before, really important to be able to identify when we have a judicial warrant or not. Because as I said before, right, we have to have that judicial warrant by ICE in order to allow them entry into any private place. And so ICE does have these administrative warrants, as you noted, that can be titled often warrant for arrested alien. These are just documents that they make internally. They're not valid judicial warrants. So another really tricky scheme that ICE plays. When it comes to actual judicial warrants, there's a search warrant that is for private property, your home, your vehicle, your belongings. It has to be very detailed in describing what exactly they want to search for, the address or description of the vehicle. Even if one number is wrong in the address, then this search warrant is invalid. It has to have the date, and for search warrants usually has a date within 8 to 14 days that it can be executed in. So if it's past that, it's no longer valid. And the important piece is that it comes from a court, right? This is very blurry, I apologize, but it's an example of one from Teller County that it says in the beginning, and then in the bottom, making sure that you see a judge's signature. Arrest warrant is for an arrest. Similarly, has to come from a court and have that judge's signature on the bottom. Good to know, right? Arrest is for arresting a person. Even if they have a valid arrest warrant, it doesn't necessarily mean they have the liberty or right to search, right, your home or property. They have to have a search warrant for that. But ICE has these administrative warrants. In the top you see it says warrant for arrested alien. It has different places for signatures, but never for a judge's signature. It's signature of authorized immigration officer. A judge will never sign one of these administrative warrants. And so these, because they aren't from a court or signed by a judge, do not permit ICE to enter or search private areas, including your home. For that, they have to have a valid arrest or search warrant, right? And so this is another little tricky play that, or manipulation that ICE uses. So for our last time here, I want to show some resources and ways that you all can support our community in this time. We're organizing right now towards, right, this community defense and liberation. And so it takes all of us, right, to come together and protect our neighbors, protect each other. One of the important lessons that you all can take from here is that as community members, it's important for us to be able to document and record everything if we are ever a bystander or a witness to any enforcement. We all have the right within Colorado to record. We're a one-party consent state, so that means only one party has to consent to record, and that can be you. And it makes a big difference to have video documentation of what happens, because as we've seen in the news in other states throughout the country, ICE is lying about how they're operating, right? If we saw what happened with the unfortunate killing and murder of Renee Good, for example, or Alex Preddy, they were lying about the ways in which these two community members were operating and helping the community members, right? And often in their enforcement, they're wanting to be covert. And so for us to document and really bring it out of the shadows makes a big difference. And it also helps that person's individual advocacy, having that documentation and proof of any violations of their rights. And so just be aware that before you record, I would advise you already have, or before you approach, you already have your phone out for it to not be confused as a weapon. Just to be careful doing that, and to let the official know if you are going to record and the incident has already started. They might be not as comfortable with you recording, but know and be adamant that you do have that right, as long as you're not interfering, right? So just make sure you're not interfering, take a couple steps back, but no, we have that right. And as I stated before, also a big support is sharing the rapid response line. So this is the Colorado rapid response line again for you all. If you want to take a picture of it, this is the line, and we have a Facebook page and an Instagram page where you can see what recent activity we've confirmed throughout the state. And so a big help is just spreading the word about the rapid response line and using it. Hopefully you never have to, but using it if you do. Oh, sorry, do you want to take a picture? And when you do see any suspected ICE enforcement, we want to make sure that we're spreading information, not panic, right? So us as community members, as callers, as witnesses of activity, our role is just as important, and important for us to make sure we're spreading verified information, right? There's already so much panic and anxiety within our community that making sure we're taking the extra step to provide all the accurate information really does make a difference. I sometimes have been in chats where folks have put just emergency alert, raid happening here, and then they go back and they're like, oh no, sorry, I went and saw the video, it's actually from LA. It's not even here. And that causes panic, and posting that in a 100+ person group chat and without actually verifying if it's real. And so we want to make sure that we have as much information as possible for spreading panic. And so a good way to verify that or remember that we're spreading all the information that is important is this acronym here, SALUTE. So SALUTE, remembering to share the size, so how many agents or vehicles did we see, the action or activity, what exactly were they doing, the location, where was it happening, right? What are the exact address or cross streets, Uniform, are they wearing any uniforms? What agency? Do we get any badges or patches? Time, when did we see it? So having a date and a time. And then any equipment that you saw, right? If we saw any additional equipment. So remembering salute is a good way of remembering to spread that accurate information, right, instead of panic. Additionally, here is another slide for the rapid response line just to share with you all that that option too, right? That if you do see or have any folks that have been impacted, they can just leave a message to be connected with a volunteer that will help document a past ICE incident. Or option one for active activity. If you or a loved one is at risk of deportation, what can you do, right? If you have family members, neighbors who might be at risk, we recommend that you start organizing personal documents. You obtain an evaluation form from an attorney as soon as possible, right? And I'll share a resource for free legal consultations that we provide. Creating plans for medical needs, childcare needs, and financial needs. This can be, I know, a little bit overwhelming to have to plan for all this. And so we have the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition created this family preparedness packet. And so this packet is not intended to defend against deportation. It's defended to have all these documents and all you need to prepare in one place. And so the objective is just to increase your sense of security. It also, when folks are detained, saves a lot of time and a lot of additional burden. And within this packet, it has the place to put all your financial documents, medical documents, and it also includes the power of attorney forms and delegation of power of attorney by parent or guardian. Unfortunately, right, if folks don't fill out those delegation of power of attorney by parent, then if they are detained, and even if they have family members who can care for those kids, if they didn't sign that, they sometimes can be left up to the state, right? Or it just makes it way more difficult. And so that's why we encourage folks, and we are doing workshops to help folks fill out these packets in ahead of time to save that additional burden and just to help increase that sense of safety. Not to, increase more fear, but it helps us to just be prepared in case of the worst. This is the QR code to the family preparedness packets. We have a guide for it and then the packet itself. If you all want to take a picture, and we encourage you all, if you ever want to keep track of any of the events that we have a Facebook and our website. We try to do different clinics throughout our regions, throughout the whole state, and hopefully we're planning to have an in-person family preparedness packet workshop here soon in Colorado Springs. So where families can come in and get those forms notarized and filled out. This Ready Now app is another great resource, and so this is an application that folks can download on their phone that can set up an emergency alert system in case they are detained. And so in those cases of emergencies, right, you might not be able to have access to your phone and call a family member or anything. And so with this app, you would just press a button and you would set up ahead of time who you wanted to alert, what information, and you set up exactly what you wanted to do. And in that case, you would just press the button. And so that's an app that we suggest for our community. Other ways to take action, right? I really like to really highlight that the rise of fascism thrives on isolation, right? So it's great to have a community. You all have the church community here. It's important to get to know each other, right? Our neighbors. And the immigration liberation movement also depends on trust building and getting to know our neighbors, right? And joining, I encourage you all to join those networks of mutual aid or create them if they don't exist. Some ways to do that, right, is helping build lists of local jobs or gigs that can support immigrant workers. I know lots of times some of us have odd jobs that maybe we need help with, and there's lots of folks in our community who are willing to do those odd jobs and need that source of employment and don't have other ways to get that income. And so doing that sort of community support is important. Solidarity funds, meal trains, meal deliveries. I know a lot of our community here is already doing some of that. And so those are great ways to take action. I have a couple last slides here just to talk about some resources. If you all know of folks that are detained, there is still hope. We highly encourage folks to have legal representation if they are detained, because we know that it makes an exponential difference in being able to defend their case. We have here some resources. If they are detained, this is the information we suggest that you gather, making sure that you have their name, their A number. This is a number that is given to immigrants on immigration documents, stands for alien number. Date of birth, their country of origin, any other information about their statuses and details about their arrest, right? And any immigration attorney if they have it. And so this information is in the family preparedness packet. If they have one filled out, great, get that packet and that will have the information that you need. If you need to locate folks, there is the ICE locator portal system, the online detainee locator system, and you'll need their name or their A number to search for a person and be able to find them. It's very, very sad that it takes up to 2 to 3 days sometimes for this information to be updated. So sometimes folks are looking for their family members, and this website could just take 3 days to be up to date to let you know where your family member is. But this is how to do it. These are additional resources. Great organizations doing incredible work right now. Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocacy Network is a group of pro bono attorneys for folks detained within the detention center in Colorado. So if they are detained and need legal representation, Romaine has a detention hotline that you can call. Casa de Paz supports folks that are leaving the Geo Detention Center in Aurora. They also support folks directly in there by supporting with visitation. They right now need more folks and more volunteers for the visitation program. They're struggling because they do that program in the weekdays, Mondays and Thursdays in the day, and not many folks can visit the folks in detainment in that time. So if any of you all are interested in making that drive and potentially donating your time that way, you can find how to volunteer on their website. They also send commissary funds and just help support the people when they're detained. And the Immigrant Freedom Fund helps pay for immigrant bonds for folks to get released from detainment. Last sort of resource, I mentioned that we offer free virtual immigration consults. This is the resource here. And this is for any community member who wants to ask any legal questions related to immigration. Maybe they've never seen an attorney, they just want to know what options are available to them, have general questions. This is low cost, apologies, only $25. You can email our legal services at coloradoimmigrant.org or call this number 720-282-9656 to sign up. And our Family Emergency Fund is a resource for families impacted by detention also. They can apply and receive up to $1,000 of emergency relief for anything they need, legal funds, rent, anything, if they have a family member who is currently detained during deportation proceedings. We've already fortunately been able to help over 30 families this year. All right, and any last questions that you folks have? I don't know how much time do we have for questions?
It's a quarter till.
Okay,
We have
perfect.
time for questions?
A few questions, awesome.
You mentioned police quite a bit. Is it all law enforcement in terms of the state, some sheriff as well?
Yeah, so when it comes to any of the police legislators, the police not sharing any information or anything, yes, it includes the sheriff as well, any state law enforcement. Yes. Yeah, Connie?
I don't know how widespread the Ready app is in the immigrant community. So if we witness a detention and we want to provide information for the detainee's family, do you advise that we go up to the person and just ask, is there anyone you want us to notify? Because that would be giving information to the agents at the same time if they answer.
Right. I would suggest, so if you do witness a detainment, to call the rapid response line, and you'll have our confirmer sent out, right, to also support in that situation. You might find that you are able to even talk to the person who is being, we call them the target of injustice, right, who is being targeted. Oftentimes our confirmers, when they do go to the situations, aren't able to talk to the target of injustice because they arrive after the situation has happened, or if it is happening, they just don't have access to reach that person. I would say being able to get that person's someone to contact if you are able to would be helpful, and to share the option too with the family member, right, the rapid response line, and that they can get connected with the docu team member that will further or more closely support them. And so we do have, if you go to the Colorado Rapid Response Network, it's its own webpage separate from our Colorado Immigrant webpage, and on there you can find flyers and that you all can print at home that have bilingual flyers about the hotline. I encourage you all maybe to have a couple of those in your car. I like to have a couple with me, and that can also be a good way to share the hotline and resources to just be able to hand that out. And yeah, any other questions? Yeah.
Political science question before we go.
Yes.
What's your opinion of the status right now of Amendments 4 through 6 and the Trump administration pushing against those, now working against nationalization?
Yeah.
Where do we stand? How much can we depend on our Constitution?
Yeah, I know it can be very scary to right now see that there's a lot of infringement on our rights, right? Obviously, we're seeing, not even when it comes to immigration, like I think something particularly with the Fourth Amendment that concerns me is the rise of mass surveillance that I think should be concerning all of us, right? The rise of automated license plates readers and how they're just mass spread at this point, and they have access to our license plates and where we're moving around without any need for a warrant or rights, a complete violation of our privacy. And that is also directly leading to the attainment of our community, right? That those license plates readers and systems like Flock are being accessed by immigration agents throughout the country in our ways that they easily are able to find our community members. And that is particularly alarming. I think what alarms me and what the root of it is the corruption of business and money interests within our government, right? That so many of our so-called democratic leaders who are standing for our community are the ones that are bringing upon this legislation or supporting it, and are the very ones voting against worker rights. If you all didn't know, like we had one of I think the first bill setting back workers' rights in decades. They increased the overtime for agricultural workers to 56 hours. And that was sponsored by Democratic representatives from Pueblo, which is ridiculous. And so I do see that threat of our rights, especially also the Sixth Amendment and how due process is just being stripped from our immigrant community. Right, with expedited removal, this administration actually increased this policy where folks are basically able to be expedited without ever seeing an immigration judge, right? And according to the Sixth Amendment, we all should be able to see a judge, be all able to have that legal representation and access to due process. But with expedited removal, it originally only applied to people within the first 14 days of their arrival and within 100 miles within 100 miles of the border. Now it was expanded to anywhere in the country within 2 years of them arriving. And so it is ridiculous how this administration just wants to disrespect and amend the Constitution to their will, right? I'm particularly alarmed about birthright citizenship. That's the only reason I'm a citizen myself, right? And so seeing that being threatened is really, really alarming. But I do think we just need to continue to fight. I also see a lot of wins, and it's unfortunate that our legal system takes so long, right, to go through these wins, and people have to suffer for months or years in order to gain any relief. But I have heard of some wins of these violations of folks who have been detained and then even within Colorado, I think our federal judge here called some of those detainments unlawful, and they were ordered to be released. So I just think we have to keep pushing. You know, we can't, even if they're being violated, that means we have to push for them and advocate them even 10 times harder, you know? Yeah, question over there.
Is there a move to have immigration, what's the correct term when you go to meet the judge? I know in other cases, like with some of my Medicare patients, we can do so online via Zoom. Is there any move to do online immigration so there isn't the trafficking back and forth to the physical location?
Yeah, great question. So moving to online formats like Zoom is a great option if that's available for folks. We always suggest folks do that. With COVID and all that, there was an increase in that being an option. Unfortunately, though, this administration, going back to that point of surveillance, is really amping up the biometric surveillance on our community. Even with DACA recipients, all our DACA recipients now have to go back and do a biometric appointment. And something that's super scary for our community, right? Having to go and do your biometrics, and they're afraid of also getting detained at that appointment, right? But they have to. It's a additional requirement now. And so, unfortunately, for a lot of these cases, they're requiring them to come in person to also do some sort of biometrics. Or and when it comes to our immigrant community, sometimes, they have ankle monitors, or there's also watches that they use to surveil our community, and they have them go in to get that technology installed. Yeah.
What's happening right now as far as the conditions in the detention centers?
Yeah.
I keep hearing horror stories and reading horror stories about that.
Unfortunately, the detention centers and the horror stories are true. I encourage you all to look up Casa de Paz and the Shutdown Geo Coalition. So the Shutdown Geo Coalition, they have a page, they have a website, they have a Facebook page. We are a part of the Shutdown Geo Coalition along with other organizations. We're working to try to shut down the Geo Detention Facility in Aurora, which actually the contract is up for renewal this October. Part of that campaign is we came out with a report just earlier this year that detailed all the horrors within that Geo Detention Center here in Aurora from the past couple years, and folks within the detention center, including some folks that were architects in their home country, did sketches of what the detention center is like in the inside, and you can see how the facilities look like, an inside glimpse and details of, unfortunately, right, the lack of access to medical care, very limited food, people are crammed right into small spaces. This administration just has these quotas of people that they want to detain and don't care about the conditions that they put these people right in order to detain them. That's why they're building and converting warehouses into places to just detain people in cages. And also, unfortunately, there was news from the Colorado Times Recorder came out with a great investigative article that highlighted 9 detention hold facilities that were being used as detention centers. So ICE has these facilities where they're only meant to hold people to be then transferred to a detention center where they're more permanently placed. According to their own policies, people aren't supposed to be held there for more than 12 hours. They were already they increased that to 72. And we found that they were holding people within these centers for weeks, even months in some cases. These centers do not have the conditions to actually house people. They are like little hold rooms, like little jails that don't even have beds or a toilet or any sort of, needs that any of the things that people need to live. And people were being held here for extended periods of time. The youngest person was 1, the oldest person was 91. And these are throughout our state. The one here in Colorado Springs was just downtown off of Pikes Peak on the 2nd floor of the Pueblo Bank and Trust. We believe it's no longer being used because of the reporting that came out, but just for you all to be aware, right, people were being held there just last year for an extended period of time. And unfortunately, stuff like that is still happening throughout our state. And as I stated before, we do think that that detention center in the North region in Hudson, Colorado will be opening next month.
And I came in a few minutes late to maybe address this. How many actual incidents have we had in the past year, up to the current time in El Paso County?
Incidents of people being detained?
Yeah.
I don't have the exact numbers on you, and also we don't, as an organization, because we just have the numbers of people who call us, right, which isn't reflective always of what is happening. But even within this year, I can tell you over 25 people have been detained in El Paso County alone in just this year. Yes, that I kind of have heard of and know. It's a mix of mostly what we are seeing is unfortunately targeting of like communities outside mobile home parks or apartment buildings that are known to be largely immigrant or Latino. There's a mobile home park just off of 8th and Cimarron that is known to have a large immigrant working class community and only has one entrance in and out. And ICE, for example, is like basically creating a checkpoint there to stop people. They've been doing that throughout our city, especially in the southeast also. And then waiting outside courthouses and public places. That's kind of what we've been seeing here so far. I think and we've seen them, I've heard them say explicitly that they want to operate in a more covert way, right? With the firing of Christine Nolan, they're wanting to shift their tactics to stay out of the news, right? And we also see that with a lot of other news that is happening within our world, that it's hard to keep up. And I have folks come up to me and ask, is ICE still around? Is this still happening? Yes, unfortunately, even if it's not being covered by media right now, it's still very much being felt and happening within our state, within our town. It's just that they're being more intentional about being covert, right? About being more silent and not wanting to be in the spotlight and not have public outcry as much. Yes.
Is there any law in Colorado that prevents ICE agents from wearing masks?
No, so unfortunately we did have a bill in legislation to a demasking bill, but it got killed by some of our Democrats. I think they were afraid of Colorado being sued by our federal government because of that law. I think California passed a similar law and they were sued. And so our Democrats just killed it before we were able to even try.
Last question.
Yeah.
Is there any politicians coming up in any elections we have coming here locally in states that you would say are good supports that are not going to be doing, as you said, killing bills and from doing more?
Yeah, so we actually, the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, we're a C3, but we also have a sister organization, our Action Fund, our C4. I encourage you all to follow them on Facebook or Instagram, and we'll be endorsing candidates there. I can't necessarily speak to the candidates within my C3 position, but then that I encourage you all to see. I will say, we saw here our Attorney General open a portal, right, to file complaints for federal immigration offenses. That's a good sign, I think, and he's running for governor. Phil Weiser. Yeah. Yeah. Of course, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Oh my God. That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know if it's beautiful, but I love the city. It's really fun. Yeah, that's great.
It's just Kinger Court. It's just like
If you need my information, Connie has it.
Learning about our app. my sister, she's got her
No, I did,
daughter.
like, I did a conversation with the woman.
Very concerned with one of the
They weren't that bad.
you throw up the slideshow. Is that posted?
I
That's- Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I've seen Molly before.
I can distribute it. Yeah, you don't mind.
Nice to meet you, girls. Of course, thank you.
You definitely.
Hi. I feel like I've seen you before. I think you have. Yes.
Yeah,
You know, I have
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I hope it was helpful.
Glad.
Glad. Well, good, I'm glad. Of course. Let me know if I can ever support again.
Are these slides?
Yeah, if you don't mind, just email us.
Yes, I have. I can email it to you.
Okay, good.
I can email it to you and Rob, and that's the information. Actually,
You're a Yeah, because
I can take it because I'll be here.
Tennessee.
Hi.
I